It's in the field radio, y'all.
Everything's real in the field.
On 91.3 FM, WVKR.
What's up, y'all? It's Erin Boogie, and I'm excited to bring you another brand new interview. I know, 2 in a row. I'm on a roll here, but I was fortunate enough to sit down with Jordan from ConnectHV for a really enjoyable interview about community, the Hudson Valley, and how ConnectHV came to be. And the idea of ConnectHV, which is a hub of area creatives, professionals, entrepreneurs, and businesses, really resonated with the core idea of in the field radio and connecting people in the area. This show was started to give people a platform to share their art and their stories, and I love that Jordan has created a platform for people from multiple sectors to come together and build. So let's get into some music, and then we'll get into the interview, and I'll be back. Welcome back to In the Field Radio. I'm Erin Boogie, and I'm here with Jordan from ConnectHV. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, I'm really excited. I'm glad that you said yes to my invitation to come on. So before we get into the ConnectHV stuff, because I definitely want to focus a lot on that, I definitely want to give our listeners some background on who you are as Jordan. So you were born and raised in the Hudson Valley. So what was your upbringing like here in the Hudson Valley?
I grew up in southern Ulster County in the village, not even the village, the hamlet of Wallkill, just south of New Paltz. I always knew that I wanted to come back to the Hudson Valley. I left for college and then came back as soon as I could. I lived in New Paltz for a while, and then I married a girl from Dutchess County, so I have since been living in Dutchess County. But yeah, went to Wallkill High School, proud Wallkill Panther. I've just loved every minute of my 35 years in the Hudson Valley.
Where did you go to college?
I went to a tiny school just north of Pittsburgh called Grove City. And being in a place as flat as Western Pennsylvania really reinforced how much I missed the Shango Mountains and the river and just everything we've got going on geographically here.
And so you spent time in New Paltz, Beacon, Poughkeepsie. Which has been your favorite place to live in the Hudson Valley?
That's a tough question because they all have a different vibe, which is something that I really like about the Hudson Valley is like you can wake up one day and think I want Bohemian College Town and drive over to New Paltz, or you can have a place as vibrant as Poughkeepsie, or if you want to be around people who are up for the day from New York City, I think Beacon is probably the place to be. Um, I think I spent most of my early to mid 20s in New Paltz, so that'll always have a special place in my heart because I feel like that's the time when you're really coming into your own and figuring out who you are aside from your parents and your high school friends and your college experience. So I think New Paltz was my favorite, but I don't know if that's because New Paltz, the town is so great, or if it was just the point in my life when I was really like flourishing initially.
And that's a fun
Yeah.
age to live in New Paltz. New Paltz, that's such an age appropriate time to live in New Paltz.
It really was. And I feel like there was just one day when I woke up and knew, okay, I am an old guy in town now. Everyone else here suddenly looks like an infant. And that's when I realized it was time to move on and go to Beacon.
That's so funny. You aged out.
Yeah.
What was your favorite place to club in New Paltz?
So I always enjoyed going to Bacchus. I feel like when all my high school friends and I would come back from college after we had turned 21, that was like the place that we would go.
Hmm.
And then Huckleberry opened, and Huckleberry was also a fun place, but very, very different scene at Huckleberry versus Bacchus.
Bacchus was around forever, man.
Yeah, yeah, they're still going strong. I feel like they just hit 50 years or something.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
Yeah,
And so you work in the tech sector as a
I do.
product designer and a software engineer. So talk about what that entails for people that might not know.
That is where you get to be creative but still work in tech. I was an only child growing up. I was always like the computer kid in school. And when I realized that that was actually a job that you could do and get paid for, I'm like, okay, I can just keep doing my hobby but get paid for it. The thing is, I really didn't want to live in like San Francisco or New York City. I wanted to live in the Hudson Valley. And when I first entered the workforce, conventional wisdom was like, you have to live in one of those places. So I figured, okay, I can toil away in obscurity in the place that I want to live, or I can live in a place I don't care about, but have like maybe this epic career doing all the stuff that I want. And thankfully, remote work became a thing just at that moment. So I was able to both live in the Hudson Valley and be working remotely for companies that were headquartered elsewhere. So my day to day is I figure out what software should look and feel like, and then I take part in writing the code that makes that come to life.
And so you were working from home long before it was a popular thing.
I have always worked from home, which people look at me funny when I say that because I know that's like a really abnormal experience, and I feel very privileged and blessed that I was able to do that because I know most people don't have that opportunity.
What are some of the ways that you were able to maintain a sense of community while working remotely?
Go to coffee shops as much as possible. I would try and find where like interesting people were and just plant myself there. And I'm naturally an introvert, so I made it my mission for a while. Every day I would try and have one good conversation with someone I had never talked to before, which at first was terrifying. And then after a couple of months of doing that, I didn't actually do it every day. It wound up probably being a couple of times a week. But after a few months of that, I realized just everyone is interesting. Everyone has an interesting story, and if you make a point of always spending time at a library or a bar or a brewery or a coffee shop or a bookstore, there are always people who are interested in like engaging with you and sharing their journey with interested people.
Was that taxing on your social battery at first?
At first it was, um, and then I don't know, at some point I adapted and it became just part of at some point I realized that I would get energy from it too if I was open to the idea that people were interesting and open and not scary. Like it doesn't have to be a scary thing going and talking with someone new.
I love that. And so you're also a writer.
Uh, I am an erstwhile writer. I like to think that I'm a writer and then I'll go months without writing anything.
Yeah, but you've been published and you've got some pieces out there.
I do. There was a while there when I was giving a lot of conference talks on design and the idea of software that has a sense of place to it. Something that just generally bothers me about the world is that all software, all websites, all these things that mediate our experience as humans, they have this placelessness to them. If you open up Uber or open up DoorDash or open up any website, basically, it's all been made by people with the same demographic background who live in the same neck of the woods. Even if they don't live in that one little part of California, they are probably surrounded by people who do, or they came out of the same school or educational background. And I miss the idea of places having a sensibility to them. I think there was, and take this with a grain of salt because I know I'm doing the whole like the old days were cool thing that's like not usually actually that true. But there was a time when if you drove coast to coast across the country and left the radio on, the vibe of the radio stations in different places would feel different. And now, no matter where you go, it's always going to be the same five songs over and over again, and it's probably the same DJ. And just because the call sign of the radio station is different, it's still iHeartMedia.
I was gonna
And
say everything is syndicated and it's all through Netflix.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's all the same everywhere. And I just feel like we've lost something there. We've lost something where if you drive 2,000 miles, you're still getting the same stuff everywhere. And so I'm obsessed with this idea that maybe the tools that we use and the sources of media that we visit, maybe they can feel a little bit like the place that they're grounded in again. And that's sort of my inspiration behind Connect HV. But anyway, all that is to say, I was giving conference talks around this idea, and this little design school in Germany asked me for permission to republish the transcript of one of my talks. And I have no idea how they found me, but I have a hard copy on the shelf behind me, and it still blows my mind that someone in Germany decided to print this random Hudson Valley guy's thoughts on place.
I love that. That happened to us actually. One of our podcast episodes, one of the inmates that listens to us used it as a reference for something that he wrote.
That's so cool.
And it just like meant the most, it just means a lot that, somebody was able to take something that we did and like especially the inmates that listen to us, like that's like they're our fan base that is like really hardcore about tuning in. And so like the fact that somebody was able to take something that we did and then use it and cite it and use it as a reference like that, I was like, wow, like that's like permanently out there. Like that would just like my mind.
And that's so special because you know that that wasn't like it wasn't like he just like bubbled to the top of like the Spotify algorithm or something. Like there was meaning and intent behind someone seeking out that and saying like, "Hey, can I use this specific podcast
Mhm.
episode?"
Yeah, and
That like is so
he
much
had
more
listened
meaningful.
live on WVKR and heard it and then like seeked it out after that to be able to use it. So it definitely is something that sticks out in my mind. It's one of those things that it's like one of the I always call it the like the unintended consequence of this show, where you're like, wow, that was never on my radar as something that, I thought would happen when I started doing this, but it happened and it's so cool.
That is like the Hudson Valley in a nutshell to me. And I know it's not exclusive to our area, but this sense of like creative serendipity, where if you are making stuff and doing interesting stuff, cool stuff just happens with it.
You
That
know what?
seems to be a common experience.
That's actually why I reached out to you. And we'll get into it now because now I want to segue into Connect HV. But when you started the Slack channel, it was like this unbelievable community of people. And it was a caliber of people that you would never think. Like you never think like the Hudson Valley is anything special until you're reminded that it's something special. And I don't know if it's just because we live here and we're just used to it. And so it's just home. And so you just think like, well, this is my home. Like I don't think that it's anything special. And maybe sometimes I think maybe it's because we're 2 hours from New York City and that place is the greatest city in the world. But all those people now are moving here. So you have
Yeah.
people that have, worked in Hollywood and worked in the tech sector at these high levels, and journalists that have worked at high levels, and they're all moving to the Hudson Valley and now they're all in your Slack channel.
Yeah, it honestly it boggles my mind. I'm a big believer that people who are in the Hudson Valley are here on purpose, and there's something about them and something about the nature of our area that just clicks. And so you wind up with these really interesting, um, I don't want to say like high performing people, but people with like big jobs, but who are very humble about it and then
Yeah.
try not to make a big deal. I just from being in the tech sector, like I recognize a lot of names of people who I know, like, oh, like that's the CEO of such and such a company. And it's funny how many people will jump into the Slack and introduce themselves as like, oh, like I'm an engineer, I work on some software. And I'm thinking, that is the CEO of a very big name company. He just doesn't want anyone to think of him that way. He wants people to think like, I'm an engineer who happens to live in Dutchess County and I want to meet people. When it's like a name brand that you see on the news like constantly. And I love that because I love that you get people who aren't quote unquote striving. They just want to be a person in an interesting place and get to know other people in that place.
Yeah,
And
and
I
they're
think that
people
that's
too.
great. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I love what you wrote on your website about Connect HV, that it connects Hudson Valley creatives, professionals, and businesses through a homegrown online directory, Slack community, and in-person events. So when did you conceive of Connect HV?
This has been a long journey. I started working on a previous iteration of ConnectHV probably 10 or 12 years ago. And at this point, I already knew like the Hudson Valley is very spread out. This is the thesis behind the whole project. The Hudson Valley is spread out. There are interesting people everywhere, but the clusters of interesting people don't really talk to each other. Like there's a scene in Poughkeepsie, and there's a scene in Kingston, there's a scene in Beacon, and all these other little towns and cities. And maybe you're a filmmaker in Beacon and you need a composer for your next short film. Maybe the perfect person exists in Kingston, but if you don't cross paths with that person, like the job's going to go to someone in LA or Chicago or someplace not the Hudson Valley. And all I want to see is I want to see like the creative energy in each of these little networks unified into a single like network of networks. Not as like a way of like usurping, like if you're involved in like an organization in Beacon, like please stay involved, get more people involved. But also that little like creative organization in Beacon should know the creative organizations in the other places too. And so I've taken a few different runs at this idea. And each time after like a couple of years and not that much traction, I think, all right, I'm like going to burn myself out. I shouldn't do this for my day job and also do this in the evening while I'm trying to be like a super hands-on dad and husband and all that. But have you ever just had an idea that like keeps itching at your brain and it won't leave you alone? And so for the past 10 years or so, I've just like kept working on variations of this. And Connect HV is just the version that it seems to have struck a nerve and it stuck. I started by doing an online directory. Anyone with a Hudson Valley zip code, you can create a profile and then you can search the list. You can say like, I'm looking for a radio host in Dutchess County and it'll spit out all of the profiles of people who are radio hosts in Dutchess County. And then a few months ago, this was in the beginning of April, I had a very strange week where three separate people who as far as I know, don't know each other, Three separate people mentioned to me, they're like, you should have a Slack channel or something and just see if people want to like have like live chat. So two is a coincidence. Three is like, all right, Kismet, I'll start this Slack. I sent out an email link to a few people that I thought might be interested, and I figured, all right, in a week, maybe we'll get a few dozen people. End of that first week, we had 350 people. We've had days since then when we gained like 100 people in a single day. Now I think we're about to hit 800 people. And I don't think that the quality of a community has anything to do with the number of people in the community, but the fact that there are so many people who are so engaged. I have heard from people who have hired local people through this community. I've heard from people who have gotten local jobs through the community. I know of, at this point, a whole handful of people who have gotten like interviews with their dream company because they made a connection through this community, just the Slack, just throwing it out there into the world, like, hey, I'd really like this type of job at this type of place. And it turns out there's someone already in the ConnectHV Slack that's doing that sort of work and can hook them up with like an interview. Um, I know people who, within like a month of joining, they started running workshops together. They'd never met each other before. Now they're close friends. And that's the sort of thing, like, I find that so life-giving. Like, that's what you can probably tell by I'm speaking faster and faster and louder and louder. This is what gives me energy, is the thought that this community, all these people were already here in the Hudson Valley. We just needed to find a way to remove the friction between them knowing each other. And it feels like this is just an idea whose time has come.
Yeah, no, I think it's incredible. I could see it. And I've seen a bunch of cool events and stuff come through there, and I found out about a bunch of new businesses that I never knew existed, and you know what I mean? So there's definitely a lot of good information in there, that even if people haven't taken advantage of something yet, the potential exists in there.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I enjoy about it is I have this irrational hatred of LinkedIn. LinkedIn just feels very, it's just a lot of cringe on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
And so I'm always hesitant to use the word networking. But the fact that the vibe of the community on the ConnectHV Slack has not trended in that LinkedIn direction. It doesn't feel like people are like being really braggy or trying to like position themselves as quote unquote thought leaders. It's just people being people, and a lot of them happen to be really interesting. And even the people who don't realize that they're interesting, it turns out they're super interesting, and they just need someone to be like, "Hey, you're interesting too." I really appreciate that because it's a microcosm of the Hudson Valley, and I think the sensibility that we have in this geography.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. What are some of the challenges you faced growing Connect HV?
There have been a lot. One is that this is not my day job. This is just something I'm doing on the side as a passion project. And so there are a lot of times when I'll finally have time at the end of the day to sit down and do some Connect HV work, and I just have no energy left. Um, that's one challenge. Another challenge is it's really hard to get people to sign up for something new. They've already given their username and password to a million services. How do you say, spend time on Slack in your off hours? That's a tough sell. And then I think finally, and this is something that I don't have an answer for yet, and I'm eager for suggestions. I'm a guy in my mid 30s in tech, and so I know a lot of other people who are guys in their mid 30s in tech. And so the initial audience was like people who I already knew. And then they send it out to other people and they send it out to other people. But there are probably whole large swaths of the community out there that don't know about this because they haven't run into someone who can tell them about it. And I don't want this to be something that's like it's me and people like me. I want this to be for everyone in the Hudson Valley. I want it to be like extremely inclusive. And I'm still working on how do we get the word out there and say like, whoever you are, this is for you. I think that's a challenge that's, yeah, my goal is for each event and each week in the Slack, we get a little bit better at this, at the inclusivity. Um, but it's also something where I am always open to suggestions and always open to input on how we can be better there because I know we can be better there.
What are some of your triumphs?
Hearing that people got jobs through it, that's really big to me because it's a hard job market.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
the first time I saw someone pop into Slack where I didn't know their name at all, that was really cool. It's always really gratifying when you realize the word is starting to spread outside of your immediate circle, because that to me means like, all right, this is something that people want. Those things are triumphs. And yeah, when we started holding events, and I had really low expectations, the event started because someone in the community owns a co-working space and said, "Hey, if you want, you can use the space sometime." Um, and that first time, I think we had about 100 people there, and since then, we'll have events where like 250 people RSVP, and that to me is like that's lightning in a bottle. You get all these interesting people in a room together, and you can see like friendships being made and connections being formed, and people just feeding off of the energy of the Hudson Valley. And that to me is like that's the victory condition. No one should like get wealthy off of Connect HV. What I want to see is our community rising up together. That's what I think Connect HV should be, and what I think we're starting to see.
That's really good because when you start throwing events, it can be nerve-wracking because the first one, like 5 people could show up. So
I'm not an events guy, so it's like terrifying because I've never run an event before. But thankfully, there are a lot of generous people who have event experience and have raised their hand and said, like, can I volunteer and just help you out for a few hours? And
that's
it's thanks to
awesome.
those people that it's able to happen.
And what has the feedback been like?
The feedback's been great. A lot of people saying, like, this is sort of what we've needed in the Hudson Valley. This is the kind of thing. There were organizations like this pre-COVID, then COVID happened and a lot of this stuff went away. Um, I think I think everyone had an appetite for something like this emerging again. So I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. I've gotten some negative feedback, usually from people who like aren't quite sure what we're doing. Is this like some like money grab thing? Is this like a carpet bagging thing, or like some, I don't know, Silicon Valley people came in and decided to try and like do an experiment at the Hudson Valley? That's why I'm including the word homegrown in like everything I write, so that people know, like, hey, I'm a guy who lives in Poughkeepsie and has lived here for like 35 years in the Hudson Valley. This is very much a born and bred in the Hudson Valley thing. And we are absolutely welcoming to people who come from elsewhere, but the Hudson Valley DNA runs through the entire project.
Are there any upcoming in-person events for our listeners to look out for?
I am very, very happy to announce for the first time that we actually are booked through February.
Oh, wow.
We're going to be in Hudson on October 24th at Barn Fox Hudson, which is in the old Etsy building. In November, we haven't actually announced this yet, but SUNY New Paltz has their annual design week, and we're doing a joint design week slide slam with students and alumni and Connect HV events. In December, we're going to do like an end of the year party in Poughkeepsie. And then January and February, those are booked, but I still need to get the event pages up. So to be announced.
Awesome. That's awesome. All right, so now we're going to do like a couple fun questions to close it out. What's your favorite place to eat in the Hudson Valley?
Brasserie 292 in Poughkeepsie is my all-time favorite restaurant.
I was going to say
Uh,
you did not even hesitate with that.
no, my first official date with my wife was there, and we have spent many an anniversary at Brasserie 292, and I still think that they have some of the best steak that you can get anywhere.
What's your favorite thing to do in the Hudson Valley?
I like going to Uptown Kingston on a fall day when it's a little bit cold out and all the leaves have changed, and walking around that part of Kingston where all the buildings are like pre-1770. It's just something very like transportive about that to me.
I love that. Now, do you listen to hip hop? Because we're a hip hop based show.
I listen to some, but I'll admit I'm not as conversant as I used to be back in college when I was surrounded by people with good musical taste.
All right, so then you don't have to if you can't, but what's your top five favorite rappers?
Top five. Oh, that's God.
Everyone always is like, it's
Am
so
I
hard.
allowed to specify the era? Like there are certain artists where I'm like, I like them during this album, but not so much during this album.
It can just be your top five. It doesn't have to be any kind of like, it doesn't have to be in order. You don't have to like
Okay.
miss out.
I
It can be
I really like
dead.
Lecrae. Lecrae, I feel like is kind of a dark horse choice because he's like he's a I don't think he describes himself as a Christian artist. He's an artist who's a Christian.
Hmm.
I find his music just like super compelling. There was a certain era of Kanye that I really, really liked. Um, I don't know if it's okay to say that you like Kanye West still, but there was an era of his music that I was like really into.
We just say that
Um,
Kanye is not supposed to talk anymore.
Yeah, I like that. It's a really good question. And I'm very embarrassed that I'm blanking because I gave you 2 out of 5.
I'm telling you, everyone struggles with this question.
It's like it's a big question. I think that's
That's okay.
I
I
like
usually
I like Childish Gambino a lot, especially like when he was first emerging and it was just like, why does Donald Glover have a mixtape?
yes.
Yeah, really liked his still like his stuff. Trip Lee is another one I like. He's also kind of like not a big name. Oh, I've got my fifth, Kid Cudi.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a good list. All right, now name a song that would shock people if they knew you listened to it.
Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen.
Yeah,
One of
epic.
the all-time greats.
Yeah, that is one of the all-time greats. All right, and if you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you tell yourself?
Don't be scared. Everyone is dealing with their own stuff. Everyone is anxious. Everyone is wondering what other people are thinking of them. And it turns out that people are just generally cool and nice and interesting, and no one's really out to get anyone. And everyone is awesome. I wish I knew that way sooner in my life than I realized it.
I think that still applies now.
Yeah.
I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
All right, and so last question. So as a female-fronted radio show, I like to I like to end the show by highlighting extraordinary women. So who's a woman that made a huge impact in your life?
Am I allowed to say my mom or my wife?
Yeah, you're allowed. You could say both.
Okay. So yeah, my mom and my wife. My mom kind of gave me a template for what is like a strong woman look like. And I'll forever be grateful to her for that. My wife she's also incredibly strong. And yeah, like every day I'm just in awe of seeing her as a wife and a mom and a creative person and someone who she's just like an idea machine. She's always having ideas, and it's really cool to see because I kind of envy that. I wish I had as many ideas as she had, and they're all good somehow.
That's
Most
awesome.
people don't have that good a success rate with ideas. And then outside of my immediate family, I should have thought of this before I started speaking. I just want to give you one non-family member. Someone that I really admire in terms of community building, Lori Ostrovsky from Hudson Valley Women in Business. She like solved her own problem and created this like titanic organization that's just so influential in the community and does so much good for our community and is supporting so many female entrepreneurs and business owners. And I just think that's the coolest thing. And when I started thinking about ConnectHV, she was a person I was thinking about because I thought if we could do anything like even a quarter as cool as what Lori has done with Hudson Valley Women in Business, we'll be in really good shape.
Awesome. So shout out mom, shout out wifey, and shout out Lori. I should really have
Yeah.
Lori on the show. I should reach out to her.
Yeah, she's like super compelling person, and she's just, I mean, all of what she's done for the Hudson Valley.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. All right, and where can our listeners find you and Connect HV?
ConnectHV.com has the links to everything, and then on Instagram it's at connect.hv.
All right, perfect. Is there anything else you want our listeners to know?
Hudson Valley is really cool, and if you're living here, you are lucky to be living here.
I agree. That's awesome. All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to In the Field Radio. I'm Erin Boogie, and I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed putting it together. I'm definitely feeling that Great God song. In honor of Jordan's top 5 list, I was able to get in some new Lecrae. I thought that was pretty cool. That was a solid top 5 list, right? I always love when people give me something different than the generic top 5 names that you hear all the time. I appreciate that a lot more when it's sincere. So I sincerely hope that you guys go and check out Connect HV. Don't forget that the next in-person event that he's throwing is October 24th at 6 p.m. in Hudson. So head over to connecthv.com and RSVP. The next event in Poughkeepsie will be in December. So make sure you head over to their social media, give them a follow, join the Slack channel so that way you can stay up to date on what events are happening. And as for me, I'll see you guys same time, same place next week. This segment of In the Field Radio is brought to you by the Village Global Network, airing on Culture Shock, Radio Verseo, Rockbox FM, and Wapter Music FM. And don't forget, you can catch the replay every Wednesday on Elgin Sound at 2 p.m.
Welcome back to In the Field Radio. You know what I'm about to do. Make sure you follow In the Field Radio. Write to me. Tell me what you think. Do song requests. You know what I'm saying? Talk to me. Do shout outs. If you write to me in the DMs, I'm going to read it. And I'm going to do what you tell me to do. Boss me around. I like that stuff. Add In the Field Radio on everything. All right, I'm about to get out of here. Big thank you and I love you to anybody that's rocking with us, all our loyal listeners. Love you guys. Thanks for chilling with those chicks on Mondays in the Field Radio 91.3 FM WVKR Poughkeepsie. Have a good night.